we'd like to begin. The power of pricing. Hi, Dawn. Welcome.
Hi, Alexa. Hello, everybody. Hello to you, Mike Jones. He just said hello in the chat box. I am Professor Dawn Fotopulos. It is a delight to be with you. And one of the things that we're going to do today is we're going to talk about not only the power of pricing, but the problem of pricing. Because what we're after is not a price, we're after profitability. There is nothing that's going to affect your profitability more than how you price your products and services. So we have a question for you, and would you please take a moment to answer this question, because this helps us help you. What pricing problems keep you up at night? Now, there was somebody in the participant feedback who had a really great question. She said, how do I put in a contract the changes in rising steel prices? And that's what keeps her up at night. What keeps you up at night? How do you price your products and services? And is there something you would like for us to answer on this webinar? So while you're doing that, I will continue with our presentation. There are sponsors that have invested not just in you but in your future, and they are amazing. Federal Express has not only an air game, they have an amazing ground game. It is really amazing what these people do. They have a proprietary packaging lab. If you are shipping something that is perishable, these are the guys to talk to. And the SCORE organization has been helping entrepreneurs since 1964. If you can believe that, they have helped 10 million entrepreneurs. They certainly can help you. And congratulations, you have hit the trifecta. Federal Express, SCORE, and the Hidden Profit Academy are here to help you double small business survival rates, because we absolutely will not accept a 50% failure rate. So what we're going to do here today is we're not just going to teach you, we're going to equip you to make better management decisions, specifically with regard to pricing. So the agenda is we're going to take you through the problem of pricing, the pitfalls and the traps that I've seen thousands of small business owners fall into. We don't want you to be among them. We want you to be super savvy about pricing. I'm going to take you through the 3 benchmarks for pricing, which most people don't know. This is not my opinion. This comes from Harvard Business School. I want to take you through some basics of discounting strategy, do's and don'ts, because again, there are some traps and pitfalls we want you to avoid. It doesn't mean you should never discount, but there is a strategic reason to discount. I'll take you through that. I want to take you through a premium pricing strategy, which sounds impossible. You know, can I premium price and sell more? And the answer is you can. I've done this for 18 years. I've proven it in both service as well as product businesses. And then I'll take you through the summary of everything we talked about. And here's the great news. A lot of you are asking, you know, are the slides available? Yes, they are. The recording will be available, as well as an ebook, which is a transcript of everything you're going to be listening to today. So you don't have to worry about remembering everything. Just listen for understanding, and we are here to answer your questions at the end of the presentation. So a little bit about Dawn Fotopulos. I have a crazy Greek last name, and the way you pronounce it is just like it's spelled, Fotopulos. I'm Associate Professor of Business at the King's College. That is my full-time work. Accounting for the Number Phobic, a survival guide for small business owners, is the only accounting book that will make you laugh. It is designed for people just like you who never really learned how to read a financial statement. It's important because if you don't, it is the equivalent of trying to drive your car with your eyes closed. So Number Phobic is illustrated by a Disney artist, and it's designed to help you make better management decisions. I am a recovering banker, a serial entrepreneur, a speaker, and I love to hang glide. But my mission is to change your future and change the risk profile of your business. And here are some of the wonderful people that I've met at the Inner City Capitals Connections Conference. They're engineers, they were physical therapists, and they were absolutely brilliant. And here's my little buddy Edmund in the UK learning how to read his financial statements. Okay, let's talk about the problem of pricing. What I have seen thousands of times over is when a small business owner has difficulty paying their bills, they think the way they're going to solve that problem is to grow their way out of the problem. And I am here to tell you that if you try to grow your way out of a problem without dealing with the source of the problem, all you are doing is scaling the problem. What you have to do is manage your way out of a cash crunch, not grow your way out of a cash crunch. So the way this exacerbates, the way this gets bigger and worse, is when someone says, I'm going to grow my business, which is your top line. Okay? When you talk about growing your business, you're talking about growing revenues, sales. And the way that most people will do that is they will discount their prices in order to sell more. And initially, you do sell more. But there are two problems with that. You destroy your gross margin, which is your gross profit. And oh, by the way, you run your business on gross margin. You do not run it on revenues. I'm going to say that one more time with feeling. You don't run your business on revenues and sales. You run it on gross margin. What is gross margin? I'll go through that in greater detail in a second, but gross margin is the gross profit. It's that additional profitability that you make over and above what it costs you to deliver something. Because from there, you get to pay all your operating expenses, and if that gross margin isn't large enough, it doesn't matter how much you're selling. It matters how much gross margin you're generating, because from there you get to pay your lawyer, your accountant, your insurance, your web designers, all of those expenses that go to keep the key in the door and keep your business open. By destroying gross margin, you destroy net income. Someone asked a great question, what is profitability? Profitability and net income are the same thing. It is what is left over in your business after you pay all of your expenses. So when you ring the cash register and you generate a sale, you can't keep all that money because there are a ton of people that have their hands out waiting to get paid. Your suppliers, your lawyer, your accountant, your web designer, all of them, right? So net income is basically why you're in business. And let me give you a data point nobody ever talks about, but you should write this down and burn it in your brain. Any business that wants to be viable, any company that is viable will have a 15% net after tax bottom line. What does that mean? That means after you pay all your suppliers and you pay your taxes, for every dollar of sales you bring in, you should have 15 cents on the bottom line. And that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but let me tell you, it's very difficult to get there, and you got to manage your way there. The other challenge with dropping your prices to sell more is you attract a price-sensitive customer, and that customer rarely buys from you at full price. So discounting to sell more is really a trap that we want to get you out of, and that's why the 3 benchmarks for pricing are going to become very important, because you can't just stick your finger in the wind and decide what you're going to charge. It's too strategic, it's too important, and we want to walk you through how to make those pricing decisions. So if you destroy your net income, what's going to end up happening is you're going to end up working harder, and you're going to have less in the bank to show for it. And if anybody on this call is in a conundrum like this is usually the reason why. So let's figure out, how do we reverse this problem of pricing? Okay, and I'm going to take you through the power of pricing. Now I want to give you a little example. Somebody earlier said, how do you figure out what your profitability is? What you see here is the top half of a net income statement. A net income statement is very simple. It's money in, money out, what's left over. Your net income statement is the same thing as your profit and loss statement, and it's the same thing as a P&L. Don't get confused. So when your accountant talks about the P&L, the profit and loss statement, the net income statement, they are all exactly the same thing. Okay? So what we're taking a look at here is your revenues, right? Those are your sales. Cost of goods sold, that's what COGS stands for, cost of goods that you have sold, shipped off the loading dock, already delivered, right? Cost of goods that you've sold, or cost of sales, same thing for those of you in service businesses. And then you have a gross margin or a gross profit, which is the same thing. A net income statement simply answers the question, are we making money or not? right? And the way we're going to figure that out is we look at this scoreboard, because that's what it is. So in the full price scenario, we're charging for this photographer anyway. She's charging $100. Her cost of goods sold is $60, and her gross margin is $40. Well, that's pretty straightforward. In all cases, when you look at a P&L or a net income statement for the corner grocery store or Johnson & Johnson, a Fortune 100 company, it will always look exactly the same. Everybody can exhale, okay? It starts with sales, cost of goods sold, gross margin. So revenues are always 100%. Cost of goods sold is a percent of revenues, and gross margin is a percent of revenues. Now I want to show you something that is going on behind the scenes that most people don't recognize when you discount your prices. If you discount your price by 20%, and usually we discount at least 20%, because if it's not 20%, you know, a 10% discount is not terribly compelling, so we discount 20%. Your price goes from $100 to $80. Well, okay, we still have $80 to work with. So we've discounted 20%. Cost of goods sold, by the way, does not change. Your internal costs don't change. Your cost to your price to your customers changes, but your internal costs don't unless you do something to reduce them. So we took a 20% discount, and then we take cost of goods away from revenues. We don't have $40 anymore. We have $20. So I want to show you something. A 20% discount in price cuts your gross margin in half. It cuts it by 50% because $20 is 50% of $40. Okay? So even though $20 is 25% of $80, on a dollar basis you're cutting the available money you have to pay your bills in half. And that will always occur regardless of what your cost structure is. What this is saying is it isn't dollar for dollar. If you cut your revenues by $1, you cut your gross margin by more than $1. And that's always going to be true. The flip side is also true. If you actually raise your price just a little bit, you will also improve gross margin more than whatever you raised your price. This is negative leverage in this particular situation. The only way that you can make money in this situation is if you reduce your direct expenses, which is this number right over here, so that you can protect your gross margin. You should be focused on gross margin like a hawk, because that will determine whether your business gets to live or die. Okay, off my soapbox. Cutting price to sell more is not a marketing strategy. There are times to discount, but if this is your primary acquisition tool, you're going to be losing money. I absolutely guarantee it. It's not a marketing strategy. It's a cop-out. Okay? You don't want more sales. It's not about growing sales. It is about growing profitable sales, or about converting unprofitable sales to profitable sales. And the key to this is not attracting new customers necessarily. If you've been in business longer than 3 to 5 years, you're going to find your profitability is hiding in your existing client base. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. So let's talk about this. Okay, let's talk about pricing. I want to give you a knowledge bomb nobody ever talks about, but I'm telling you it operates and it's real. Okay, you ready for this? If your sales closure rates are higher than 25%, you're pricing too low. Yeah, that's right. You're pricing too low. So in other words, if you are talking to 10 prospects, and out of those 10 prospects you close more than 2 or 3 become customers, you're probably pricing too low. And let me give you an example of what that looks like on the ground. So there's a good friend of mine who runs a PR agency here in New York, and she's a great lady, and she's very effective at what she does. And I asked, and she never gets any sleep, by the way. She works about 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and she's exhausted, and she said, you got to help me. It's a small shop. She's only got 3 employees. And she delivers. When somebody hires this woman to do public relations for her, she gets them exposure, and in really high-profile places. So I said to her, what's your closure rate? How many prospective clients do you talk to and how many do you close? She said, well, I speak to 10 and I close 8 out of 10. So I have an 80% closure rate. So I said, that's terrible. And she said, what? I think it's great. I said, yeah, it's not so great. You should double or triple your prices, do half the work you're doing, get 8 hours of sleep, generate triple the gross margin, because unless you want to be Burson Marsteller where you're going to be global and you're growing to that kind of scale, you've got to generate gross margin. Better to have a smaller customer base that is more profitable than a huge customer base and you end up in an early grave because you're overworking. So for her, she needed to walk away from, she needed to double her prices. I'm not kidding you. Double her prices because, and when we go through competitive pricing comparisons, I'll show you, but she needed to double her prices so that there are at least a few prospects that said, oh, you're too expensive and walk away, but then when somebody else that they hire who's cheap doesn't do the job, they will come back to her because they want the performance. It isn't just about the price. It's what you are delivering relative to what you are charging. So I want to stiffen your backbone just a little bit. I don't want you to be afraid to turn away business that is unprofitable. Now it isn't just about pricing in a vacuum. We're going to talk about the value proposition in a minute because value and price have to be correlated. Price doesn't happen all by itself. Okay? So let's take you through what the key is. And the key is you've got to know why people or businesses buy from you instead of the competition. You've got to know this. And if you don't know the answer, you've got to ask that question. And you're going to be very surprised at what people say. So I recommend that everybody who is on this call, before the week is out, I want you to call your top 5 clients, and I want you to ask them that very simple question that's on this slide. No doubt when you made a decision to purchase the products or services that you buy from my company, that you were looking at other companies. Why did you choose us instead of the competition? I actually have every one of my business owners that are in my workshops ask that question and then come back to the workshop with the answers. And the answers are always very interesting. One guy who's a commercial real estate agent here asked that question of one of his top customers who happens to be a gentleman who is wheelchair bound. And the guy said, you were the only one who took me seriously. And he said, you treated me with respect, you were responsive, and he said, there was no question I was going to do business with you. Well, guess what? He not only did business, he did tens of millions of dollars worth of business with my buddy who was a commercial real estate agent. So you got to know why people buy from you instead of the competition. And remember something, we all buy value, we don't just buy price. I want to tie your hands behind your back and realize price is not the only variable that people decide to buy or not buy. So I want to give you a little equation. It's called the value equation. Again, this comes from Harvard Business School. End benefit over price. What's in it for me over what I have to pay in order to purchase that? So what's in it for me is a value proposition. That's the value that you're delivering, but it's not just about cost and money. It's about cost and time, psychic costs, and it's not just about the tangible benefits, it's about the intangible benefits. If you take a look at the shoes you're wearing, the clothes you're wearing, the food that you eat, you don't just eat the cheapest thing. You don't just wear the cheapest thing. There's a reason. Something fits better. It tastes better. There are times in your life where you have paid a premium for something. Ask yourself why when you had cheaper alternatives. And the reason is somewhere hidden in this equation is the reason you paid that premium. The most important thing is for you to add value and differentiate what you offer. What the heck does that mean? I want you to remember a time where you had a really lousy customer experience, and we've all had those, right? We can't get a question answered, we have some questions, we have some concerns, whether there's nobody there to answer our questions, or we have situations where we've had a fabulous customer experience before we bought, during the sale, and after the time we bought. I have an electrician who's done some work for me, and the guy's a godsend. We go through the project, he gets it done, he's no drama, He does what he says he's going to do. He charges me a fair price. Are you kidding? I can't wait to pay the bill with this guy. Everybody in your life has somebody like that. They're an insurance policy. There's somebody who lowers your blood pressure. You know they're going to be there when you need them. Remember something. We don't buy. Nobody buys what you do. They buy what you deliver, okay? They buy what you deliver. Do you go to a dentist that makes that whole awful experience painless? Do you go to a designer? Have you had a designer that's award-winning because they do beautiful clothing and they beautify our lives? There is a reason that we buy, and I want to talk to you just for a minute about brands. Brands are really important because you know what a brand is? You hear a lot of conversations about brands. What a brand is it's a promise. That's what it is. Inside that brand is a repository of all this expectation that if I buy that brand, if I associate with that brand, there are certain blessings that are going to accrue to me because that brand has a reputation that others have said is true. So if you don't have a brand, if your reputation isn't high enough, then borrow a brand. I did this when I owned Bedazzled Incorporated. Back in the day when dinosaurs roamed the earth, it was the very first business that I ever had. And we did screen printed t-shirts, which doesn't sound very interesting. But we actually sold Gary Comer, who was the chairman of the board of Land's End Yacht Stores, and we were in their catalog, and it was a very big deal. We were kind of like the dog that caught the bus. And whenever I went to speak to other retailers and showed them our product line, they would ask me, you know, who else have you sold to? Because we were this tiny little company. And I would just drop that brand, Land's End Yacht Stores, and we were in like Flynn because Land's End was like the good household seal of approval. Land's End had very high standards. Everybody knew it. So if Land's End did business with us, that meant that they vetted us and that other retailers, that we weren't as high a risk, if you will. So borrow a brand. So I want to take you through the 3 benchmarks of pricing, which is really important. Okay, and let's go through it. It's like a thermometer. Cost plus pricing basically means you need to know what it costs to deliver a particular product or service to the marketplace. And that cost needs to be fully loaded with your direct labor and your direct materials. If you're a service provider, then it's going to be your direct labor only, right? But if you are a product provider, it's going to be direct labor, direct materials. What is that? If you make coffee cups, it's going to be all the direct materials that go into making that cup plus the labor to make that cup. For us, when we were doing t-shirts, it was all the raw materials, the fabric, the screen printing, the cutting, the sewing that went into making a finished product. That's your direct cost. And you got to mark that up because you're not in business to break even. You got expenses to run that business. There's risk to running that business. You are not ripping anybody off by marking up your direct expenses. You have to do that to survive and thrive. And by the way, as a customer, I want you to make that premium because I want to have access to your beautiful t-shirts. I want to have access to that delicious coffee in the future. And if you don't stay in business, I won't have that. Okay, so cost plus means you got to know what your fully loaded costs are, and then you have to mark that up a premium. In a minute, I'm going to tell you what that premium is and why it's important. Competitive pricing is sort of the middle ground. You got to have some peripheral vision to know what your competitors are charging, but you have to be really clear on what they are delivering relative to what they're charging because their price is only half the equation, okay? And then true economic value, I'm calling the Holy Grail, because if you can develop a value proposition, you can offer value. The way you do business is so marvelous, and it's so much better than anybody else that's out there that you are untouchable. You can charge whatever you want, and you make the competition and you make your internal costs completely irrelevant. And if you want an example of this, just take a look at the really high-end designers. Okay? Why on earth, how on earth can they charge thousands of dollars for a handbag that probably only has a cost of goods of a couple of $100? How do they do that? It is not just the brand, but it is the perceived value of what they are delivering. And the brand, of course, is an exclusive brand, and the people that want access to that brand and they want it to accrue to their reputations will spend that money, invest that money to get the psychic as well as the tangible benefits. So let's unpack this just a little bit. Okay, cost plus. This is the absolute minimum clearing price you should charge. You need to know, first of all, what your fully loaded costs are by item that you sell and by service that you offer. Okay? And you've got to mark that up at least 45%. So if you don't know what your loaded costs are, you've got to ask your accountant because they can pull that for you. And not just an average loaded cost, a legitimate by product or by service fully loaded cost, because you're going to find that some products and services have very different dynamics. And you want to keep your gross margin to a healthy 30%. You're marking up from cost of goods. What does that mean? That means you need to mark up 45% above cost of goods in order to protect the 30% gross margin. So I'm not going to go through all the math with you, but I want to give you just a little illustration of how we make a big mistake when we're trying to figure out what the cost plus pricing should be. And again, this is your minimum clearing price. If you can't get it on the market, you got to add value and raise the price. You got to reduce your direct expenses, or you got to stop offering whatever the heck that is, because there is no such thing as a lost leader. You will lose money, okay? So let's look at this little example. If something costs you $10, your fully loaded costs, right, direct material, direct labor, $10, and you want to mark and you want a 30% gross margin, I have asked this question a few thousand times. I say to everybody, if it costs you $10, you want a 30% gross margin, how much should you mark it up? And in almost every case, everybody says, oh, 30% of 10 is $3. I need to mark it up $3. But that's a problem, because if you mark it up $3, you're not going to get a 30% gross margin, because gross margin is predicated on revenues, not on cost of goods. So if you take a look here, if we add $3 to 10, that gives us our new selling price, right? $3 is our gross margin. It's in the numerator. Our selling price is always in the denominator. Gross margin over selling price gives us a 23% gross margin, not the 30% that we need to have a healthy business. Okay? Minimum gross margin, hurdle rate, 30%. What does that mean? For every dollar of revenues you bring in, you got to generate 30 cents in gross profit at least. So in order to do that, we need to mark up that $10 by $4.25, or here I'm using 45%, because if I said 43% nobody would ever remember. That will keep you honest. But in this case, 45%, if we did that, we have $4.50 in the numerator. Our new price is the cost of goods plus our gross margin, which is $14.50. We end up with a 31% gross margin. Whew, now we can finally make some money and keep the business stable. Okay? Let me give you an example of what that looks like on the ground. So here's this guy. He's a granite countertop installer, and he's fabulous at what he does. This guy never has callbacks. He's like accurate like a surgeon. He's been at it for 20 years. And oh, by the way, you're not installing granite countertops when you're 75 years old. So he's in his 50s. He's got to make money while he can, because at some point he's not going to be able to do this business anymore. He bills out in sales $750,000 a year, which sounds like a lot of money, right? He pays himself $35,000 in income, which is ridiculous. Don't you agree? I mean, if he's that great, so we said, okay, we're going to just shift the balance on what this guy does. So he does residential, he does commercial, he does everything in between, kitchens and bathrooms. I said, no, we're going to focus on the high gross margin segment of the market. And for him, it was commercial. I said, you're going to stick to commercial. You're going to do 3 jobs a year. You're going to triple your price, because these guys can pay it, and they want an insurance policy. They don't want callbacks, because that costs them a lot of money, the general contractor a lot of money. So even though you're not going to get every single job, the jobs that you do get, you're going to make a lot of money. So his revenues actually went down to about $600,000. He was paying himself $130,000 within 12 months. Okay, that's the reasoning I want you guys to think about because it's going to make the most sense. Okay, here we go. Let's take a look at competitors. You can't just compare what they're charging. You got to compare the value that they're offering with what they're charging, okay? Because again, price is not in a vacuum. What kind of service are they offering before the sale, after the sale? Are they responsive when people have questions? I had a web developer, and if I had a question, I had to wait 5 days to get an answer. Guess what? I can't operate in that environment. I have to have a responsive web designer, and I will pay more to have the responsiveness. Responsiveness is absolutely mission critical. What kind of expertise do they have? Are they experts in my particular industry? If they are, you know what? They bring a lot of knowledge about my competitors, about the history of the industry, about where the industry is going, about regulations in that industry. I will pay a premium to have access to somebody like that. I will pay a premium to do business with Federal Express because you know what? They are experts in international shipping. And they're not just a shipper, they're problem solvers. And they know how to do business in 100 different currencies. They know how to solve my problem if I'm shipping chocolates to the Oscars, which Philip Ashley Ricks had to do in August to make sure that everything arrived in perfect condition anytime in any weather. Right? I'm going to pay for that expertise because it protects my downside and my risk. Consistency, guess what? Federal Express will absolutely guarantee that something arrives on a date by a certain time or I get my money back. They're the only shipper that will do that. Will I pay a premium for that? You bet. And you know what? The premiums are so small right now that it's almost negligible. If you're not sure what's happening with your competition, I want you to mystery shop your competition. Make believe you're a customer. Go out into the marketplace and look at the entire customer experience because it's not just what you do, it's how you do it that ends up being your source of value and your differentiator. Let's take a look at true economic value. Okay, that's the holy grail. This is the highest price that you can charge, and it basically makes your costs and it basically makes your competitors irrelevant. What's in it for me and what do I have to sacrifice to get it? I want you to think about things like psychological costs, logistical costs, friction costs. Let's talk about how many people here own an automobile, okay? The people with the absolute worst reputation, and I'm not making this up, are automobile repair shops. They have a horrible reputation for being dishonest, for overcharging. I could go on and on. You find an honest automobile repair guy and you practically write them into your will because they are so rare and so valuable. We are willing to spend a premium with people like this because they keep us safe on the road. So tell me something. What is the safety of your family and what is the safety of your life worth? Will you pay a premium for that? You absolutely bet you will. I know I have. So true economic value, it goes back to that value equation. What's in it for me, right? What benefit am I gaining versus what it actually would cost me? If I don't have a lot of downtime in my life, that's worth a lot to me. And again, I will pay a premium for that. So let's talk about, this is all part of what I'm framing the Hidden Profit Roadmap. On the Hidden Profit Academy, which has a lot of courses that talk about a lot of this stuff, you can identify hidden profit in your business in a very, very short period of time. In most cases, most business owners underprice what they do because they're afraid of losing the sale. And I am here to tell you those days are over. Don't be afraid to lose the sale and gain the gross margin on the back end. And the good news is you don't have to make any major shifts or major changes in the business, but I'm going to show you how important positive leverage is in this whole pricing strategy schema. So I want you to make twice the money and I want you to do it in half the time. And by the way, you're going to find a customer who values what you do and who wants to compensate you adequately for what you do. No gimmicks, no cold calling, none of that stuff. And I can tell you that I talked about this at the Inner City Capitals Connections Conference, which you heard about not too long ago. And there were 500 people in the auditorium. And one woman really got this. She really got it. And she is the heir apparent to a family business. She ran out of that auditorium. She called her office. She said, we're going to do things differently next time. And she came up to me at lunch, and she said, you just saved me $10,000 a month. With one customer, I got 500 customers. So she said, this changed my life. I want it to change yours too. So I want you to ask a question. What do you do better or different than your competitors? And if you're not sure, I want you to reach out to your top 5 loyal customers. I want you to do this. Why do you buy from me from the competition? And it's a little scary, right? Because you sort of feel like you're opening your kimono. But ask that question because your loyal customers can't wait to tell you how wonderful you are. And you know what? When we're having tough days, you know what I do sometimes? I take those testimonials and I stick them on my bathroom mirror. I do, because that's the reason why we get up in the morning and we work so hard, is so that we can bless others, and your loyal customers can't wait to tell you. I want you to remember something. Discounting to sell more, especially when it's high season or there's a lot of demand, is financial suicide. Please don't do this anymore. And I want to give you a little example. Oh, I'm calling it Grandma Soaps. I had a student that was in my marketing class, and I spend a lot of time telling my students to compete on value, not on price, and he wanted to put a marketing plan together for his grandmother who did artisanal soaps that looked a lot like the picture that you see there. And she would always sell out at farmers markets and trade fairs and what have you because her soaps were so wonderful, and she had loyal customers that would come back and buy from her over and over again. She didn't have enough production actually for the demand that she had. So in a capacity-constrained environment, please listen to me, when you don't have a lot of capacity, you either do one of two things. You either expand your capacity or you raise your price. In this case, my student recommended that his grandmother lower her prices, and I practically failed him in the course. I said, didn't I teach you anything over the last 15 weeks? When you're in a capacity-constrained environment, you do not lower prices. You raise the prices. So there may be a lot of demand out there, but the people who do buy are going to buy because it's the quality, not the price. Okay? Don't be Grandma's Soaps, please. So let's talk about discounting strategy, okay? Now I'm off my soapbox. There are times to discount. There are. But you should use discounting strategically, not as the primary acquisition tool. If you got out-of-season goods, and everybody knows they're out of season, right? You're selling clothing. You've got summer clothing, and it's into the fall, and you're going to get a new line of clothes. It makes sense to sell out. Or you have odds and ends, different sizes, and you want to just sell the stuff out, raise some cash, turn that inventory into cash. Makes perfect sense. If you've got damaged goods that still have some useful life, it makes perfect sense to discount, because one thing you know about inventory, unless it is the Hope Diamond, it does not go up in value the longer you hold it. If you have goods that have a very short shelf life, especially things like perishable goods, foodstuffs and things like that, makes perfect sense for you to discount, so that better to get a 10 cents on the dollar or 20 cents on the dollar than nothing. Or if you're in the middle of a slow season, it might make some sense to discount. So again, I'm not saying you should never discount, but you should use discounting very strategically. Every single small business owner is capacity constrained by definition, okay? And if that's true, that means that all of us should be shooting for a premium pricing strategy, not a discounting strategy. I want you to remember something. If you put something out there in the marketplace and it's not selling, don't always assume it is because the price is too high. You might not be selling that thing because you're talking to the wrong target audience. You're talking to an audience that doesn't care. Or you're talking to them at the wrong time. Let me give you an example of what that looks like. Right now, if I want to talk to accounting professionals, I'd be out of my mind because between now and April the 20th, they can't hear anything other than tax preparation. They are totally under the pile for that April 15th deadline with the IRS. If I want to reach accounting professionals, I need to reach them in the summertime. After May, after they've all caught up on sleep because they're all sleep deprived at the end of April, right? After they've taken a vacation with their families and reconnected with people they haven't seen in 3 weeks because they've been working so hard, April, May, June, maybe June and July and August are the best times for me to reach them. So you may be talking to the wrong target audience, maybe you're talking to them at the wrong time, or you may have not done a good job of articulating what your value proposition is. But test those 3 things first before you hit the back button on your computer and lower your price reflexively. Okay? And the key is your customer testimonials are going to hold the key. If you're not sure what your value proposition is and you ask your top customers what they have, capture what they say, because you're going to hear so many things that you didn't expect. Don't assume you know. But I want to tell you something else. If you don't do a good job of articulating what your value proposition is, prospective customers are going to fill the gaps with understanding with negative assumptions because that's human nature. We are cynics by nature. So you've got to do a really good job of articulating why somebody should buy from you instead of the competition. So what bodes for premium pricing? So I'm giving you just some ideas here to spark your creativity. Do you have unique credentials? I worked with a lady who's an MD, and she has tremendous experience in helping pharmaceutical companies get FDA approval for new drugs. What's that worth? How about a few $1 billion? Unique credentials, there are very few people like her that have her track record. Okay? Done right the first time. If what you do right the first time, somebody hires you, they know it's going to get done just like my electrician. Take a Jimmy McGahee. Take a page out of Jimmy's book. Be Jimmy, right? Brand reputation, responsive, fast turnaround. You're not just a supplier. You are a strategic partner. So there was an architect here in New York who did all sorts of things, but one of the services that she offered was what we call plan submissions to the building department here in New York City. It is an absolute nightmare to get a plan approved through the City of New York. Bureaucracy doesn't even touch it, right? But she was a genius at this. And she could get this done in record time because she knew the people in the building department. They knew she knew her business. They knew her plans were going to be really well done. And she got it done the right time, the right way, in record time. And she could also get these things done on holiday weekends, which is like impossible. So I said to her, you should triple your prices on a holiday weekend, because a general contractor that has $1 billion project will spend 3 times the money to get it done, because for every day that he or she has to wait, it's going to cost him $1 million. Is it worth it to spend another $30,000 to get this done? The short answer is absolutely yes. Okay. Your customers will tell you if you ask them why they buy from you instead of the competition. And here are some of the responses that I've heard over the years, right? You gave me confidence. You know, you made it really easy for me. That's what Numberphobic actually is designed to do, to take something that everybody's terrified of and actually make it easy and common sense. What a concept, right? Or for an accounting professional, you know, I sailed through an audit with the IRS. You know what that's worth? Oh my goodness. You know, you lowered my blood pressure. I know it's going to be done right. I don't have to worry. These are big deals, and people will pay a premium for it. So where I show you what it costs if you lower your price by 20%, I want to show you what you gain if you raise price even as little as 5%. So this is our full price scenario, which you saw before, right? $100 minus 60, your direct costs, gives you 40% gross margin or gross profit. Now let's look at what happens if we increase price by 5%, which is not a lot. By the way, if you're going to raise prices, best time to do it is at the end of the year, or if there's an inflection point in the marketplace or in the life of your business. So here we are. We raise it to 105%. revenues are always 100%, cost of goods is 60. Now our gross margin goes from 40 to 45. That doesn't seem like a big win, right? Our gross margin as a percent of revenues goes from 40% to 43%. However, we raised gross margin by $5, and $5 divided by $40 is actually a 12.5% increase in gross margin. We raised price by 5%, gross margin by 12.5%. This is positive leverage. We like this. We want more of this. And by the way, test it. Test it. Take some of your strongest products or services and raise it by 3%, 5%. Doesn't have to be a lot. And watch what happens to your gross margin and watch what happens to your bank account in the process. Okay, so let's go through the summary. If your closure rates are higher than 25 or 30%, you're probably pricing too low, and you should raise your prices, see what happens. But most importantly, you should find out first why people buy from you instead of your competition. Again, what's your positioning? That will help you guide your positioning and then how you speak to other prospective customers when the time comes. You got to capture your customer testimonials, because that, my friends, is the evidence that what you're doing really matters. Premium pricing is the goal. You should discount rarely, not regularly. And your loyal customers are the ones that are going to drive profitability, because they're the ones that buy from you over and over again. They're the ones that are going to refer new business to you. So remember, what's the message that you're sending out there? What is your positioning? And are you using customer testimonials strategically to speak for you? They are the most objective, and they are also the most powerful and credible sources of your reputation. They're the ones who speak about your reputation. Are you talking to the right target audience? Because not all customers are created equal. And do you have the best fulfillment, the best service, and responsiveness? So you don't want more sales. You want more net income, right? You want more profitability. Gross margin should be 30% in order to drive that net income. At least 30%. And if you chase every sale, you will go bankrupt. It's just a matter of time. And premium pricing will get you out of the problem of pricing, which was that doom loop we talked about at the top of the hour. Answer the why that you're premium pricing, and you will convert customers, not just loyal customers, into collaborators. Okay, a couple of things. Ryan Lane of Dream Beer did this, and the guy was hooting and hollering all over the halls of FedEx saying it works. This woman is not blowing smoke. He does beard oil. He's got loyal customers. He turned them into his collaborators. They helped him get the word out. It was a phenomenal success. Okay, a word about our sponsors. Guys, the SCORE organization is amazing. It is free expert advice, and they are near you. They have over 300 locations. They have over 10,000 volunteers. Am I dreaming? No, you are not, and you're out of your mind. If you don't reach out to these folks, you can go to score.org, put in your zip code. It will show you the nearest location. Beat a path to these guys' doors, because they are going to save you years of struggle and frustration, and they will improve the risk profile if you work with these people, okay? So please do that. It is free advice, and most of us are solopreneurs. We need that accountability. We need that support. A lot of these people are retired. They've earned their stripes in the marketplace. They are successful in their own right, and they are so willing to share what they know with you. So I want to tell you one more thing that is spectacular. The FedEx Small Business Grant Contest is available to everybody that is on this call this month. You got to enter by March the 28th, and I have a question for you. What would you do if Federal Express hand you a check for $25,000? This is a grant, not a loan, right? This is an investment in your business. I've had the privilege of meeting a number of people who are grant award winners, and they are incredible. And I've never seen a global organization care so much and invest so much in the future of these grant winners. And a shout out to Angela Stevens and Camille Washington and Kelly Martin and Becky Huling. These are the guys that drive this grant contest. You got to enter by March the 28th, and you can go to fedex.com/grant contest to do that. It costs you nothing, and you'd be out of your minds not to do this. And not only that, but you become part of an alumni group that is absolutely world class. Please apply. Again, it doesn't cost you anything. And oh my goodness, $25,000, that's a gift you don't have to pay back. You don't see that every day. So if you'd like more, reach out to me. I answer my emails. It may take me a little while, but I do. I'm at dfotopulos@gmail.com. There is an ebook that is a transcript of everything that we talked about today, and that is a gift to you, and that's because FedEx sponsored my time to create that. I want to thank them again, and I want to thank the SCORE organization for doing such a spectacular job of producing this webinar. You know you can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook, and it's all there. So forgive me for being a little long-winded, but if you've got questions, type it into the chat box. And I know Alexa's going to be coming back online so we can answer your questions. If we don't get a chance to answer them while we're all together, I will answer your questions and I will do it online, and we will publish the answers, and we'll make sure that you know the link to find those answers. So not only is the recording available to you, the ebook, which is a transcript, is available to you. The slides are available to you. And also anybody that decides they would like to get access to Accounting for the Number Phobic, if you do buy the book, do let me know. There's no pressure ever to do that. But if you do, I have a study guide that I'd be happy to send to you. So let's take a look at the questions. It looks like there's wonderful questions here about pricing. Alexa, are you there?
I am. Dawn, thank you so much. We will go ahead and move into the Q&A portion of our call. I'll be reading the chat questions that our participants have been sending in. In this time remaining, we will address just as many as we can. We've had a lot of great questions come in today, so let's go ahead and jump right into them. Dawn, our first question, it comes to us from Bruce. So Bruce asks, when you have global regions, what is your suggestion to keep them from price cutting into another region?
Well, you know what, Bruce? That, of course, is a strategy to create barriers to entry for competition in that region. The first thing you have to do is you've got to establish a foothold among loyal clients in that region. And then what I would recommend that you do, you can't prevent anybody else from cutting a price, okay? You just can't. But what you can do is you can sell against them. And you know who's really good at doing that is the Ritz-Carlton. There is a wonderful case study that Harvard has available, and I think it's $4 or $5, and it's called How to Fight a Price War. Because when you cut prices in various geographies, that's what usually happens, is you start a price war and it's a race to the bottom, and then nobody makes money. But large companies will do this because they're willing to lose money in one geography in order to make money in another. If you're a small purveyor, you don't have that luxury, but I encourage you to read that How to Fight a Price War. And again, it's published on Harvard Business School Cases. If you just simply Google How to Fight a Price War, it will give you some really good strategies about how to create barriers to that happening and how to retain the customers that you do have so they become bulletproof and they don't become susceptible to being stolen by your competition just simply on price. So I could spend 8 hours talking about how to fight a price war, but that particular reading would be super helpful to you and to everybody else on the call for that matter.
Okay, Dawn, next question comes from Brian. For a new and somewhat unique product, how do I gauge where the price should be?
You're going to have to test that, Brian. So the first thing that I would say is, if it's a new product, then it's really a market test. It's not quite a business. So have you had people test the product? What I recommend you do is get some testers together, let them test the product, and I would ask them, what would you pay for this? people who are end users for that product or who would be heavy users of that product. The other thing that I would, in other words, if this is a brand new product and it's patented and there's nothing like it in the marketplace and all of that, I would still do that market test, do a little bit of market research. Then I would be super clear in my mind, first of all, how large is the market? What percentage of that market do I want to get? And do I want a pricing penetration strategy? In other words, I want to get as many customers as I can as quickly as I can. Then I'm going to use the cost plus pricing strategy, right? I need to know my direct costs. Raise that by 45%. That's my minimum price. Or if I want to generate a lot of gross margin really fast, then I'm going to use what Apple Computer uses for their iPhone launches. That's when there's not enough product, tons of demand. I super price my product. I capture a lot of gross margin in a very short period of time. And then as supply rises, I lower my price over time. So is it a market penetration strategy or a gross margin maximization strategy? But I would do the market research first. Make sure that you have something that you know can get traction with a target audience that really cares about that. And then I would determine whether you're going to use a cost plus or a true economic value pricing strategy.
All right, Dawn, next question comes from Joseph. What if we know our product doesn't have the value of the competition?
Oh, well, that's a challenge, because if you don't have the value of the competition, you still have to ask the question why people buy from you instead of the competition. But if it doesn't have the value, you have to find a variable where you can add value, or you need to decide, frankly, if you should continue offering that product. Because if you're losing market share and people are migrating to your competition, there may reach a point in time where it doesn't make any sense. And actually it happens all the time, right? The marketplace is moving, competitive pressures change. So our photographer, the lady that took my photograph on the back of Accounting for the Number Phobic, is a fabulous photographer, and she's in the Ohio market. And for years, she's been at it for 20 years, she was doing a lot of portrait and wedding photography, and then of course the digital world showed up, and a lot of people were unwilling to spend the kind of money on her spectacular work. They just didn't feel like it was worth it anymore. And what I said to her was, you should be a product photographer and work with ad agencies and work on the commercial side, because hour for hour you'll make a whole lot more money, and there isn't as much competition in that space, especially in the Ohio market, as there is, for example, in taking weddings. So what you might want to do is look at your target audience and decide if in fact you should still be dealing with that same target audience or shift your product offering. But you're going to have to make some adjustments, because you can't keep cutting price and stay in business.
Okay. And Dawn, I wanted to find out, we're getting close to the top of the hour. Would you mind going over just a little bit to take time for a few more questions?
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
Okay, excellent. So then our next question, it comes to us from Tammy. How do you price correctly for a service-oriented business? And she says, such as a rental venue, facility, etc.
Well, I'm going to give you a little example. So Norm Brodsky, who was the interview for Chapter 10 for Accounting for the Number Phobic, is a very, very smart man, and he's very successful. And he's learned the stripes in the school of hard knocks. He's gone bankrupt in his life, and he's also made a ton of money. And he talks about his father, who was a salesman, and we talked about this pricing question. It's a really good question. It's a hard question to answer. He said, I'm going to give you an example. So my father was telling me about a guy that goes to buy a pair of glasses, and he's there with the optometrist, and he fits them, and he says to the optometrist, how much do I owe you? The optometrist says $50, and goes, oh, $50, that's all? And the optometrist says, well, no, that's just for the frames. He goes, oh, okay. He said, well, then $100. He goes, oh, well, that's not bad. He goes, no, that's just for the frames and the left lens. It's $150. So what he's doing actually in the dialogue is he's charting the price sensitivity of the client. And so when he gets to like $250 and the client starts screaming, he goes, all right. So we'll make it 2 1/4 and we'll call it even, right? So you don't really know that you've gone over the line until you start to get a real response, a negative response. But everybody's so afraid to get the negative response that they won't supercharge. Remember something. You can always reduce a price. It is the easiest thing in the world to reduce a price. So again, you got to take a look at what you're offering. So rent sounds like it's a commodity, but it's not necessarily a commodity if you're in a great location. It's not a commodity if you have special services that are that are associated with that particular space and location. If you have high-speed internet, if you offer HVAC on the weekends in New York, most buildings don't have air conditioning in the summer, and they don't have heat in the winter on the weekends. And I got to tell you, it gets a little cold and it gets really steamy. If I have work to do, I need to get it done on the weekends. All of that is just to give you a little bit of a sense of you need to know what your competitors are charging, you need to know what they're offering relative to what you're offering, and then you need to make some decisions. But I would price high at first, be clear, and describe what kind of value and responsiveness you're offering your tenants. See how it compares to your competition, and then you can always lower price. Or you can add value. So here in New York we have joint workspaces. There are a lot of incubators, and they've got coffee stations and they have other things that add value to the space. So that's just to give you a little window. You're going to have to test the market.
All right. Next question comes from Sonia. Can you advise on how you would factor in the cost of acquisitions and retention?
Okay. So you don't have a loyal customer until that customer buys from you 3 times. This is Dawn Fotopulos speaking. In my lifetime, that is pretty much what I've discovered. The first time somebody buys from you, you're on probation. They're not buying from you because they're sold out and they're loyal. They're still dating you. They haven't married yet. They're testing you to see if the value that you say you're providing you actually do provide, and if you actually are providing more value than what you suggested. So it's very, very important that the after-sale customer nurture happens. And a lot of us forget that you are at greatest risk of losing a customer after that first sale. But that first sale is absolutely strategic. The other thing too is when someone buys from you in the first try, they're not giving you the greatest share of wallet that they have. None of us do, right? If we're testing a new resource, we don't give them the big chunk of our business. We're testing to see if they're real or not. So buy from you the second time, they want to see if the first time was a fluke or if you're really solid. The third time, they're actively choosing you over the competition. So cost of acquisition has to do with what did it take to bring that person into your ecosystem. And we have to look at things like if we're doing ad campaigns or if we're doing conferences or what have you, what did it take to bring that person into our ecosystem? And in all likelihood, the cost of acquisition is not going to get covered by the gross margin on that first sale. The gross margin is what the profitability is by customer. And likelihood is you're not going to start making money on that customer until they bought from you 2 or 3 times. If that customer becomes a super loyal customer, and there's a great reading through Harvard Business School, it's called Putting the Service Profit Chain to Work. It's a reprint, actually Harvard Business Review. It's a reprint and it's free. And it's a PDF online, Putting the Service Profit Chain to Work. I encourage everybody here to download it, print it out. It's an MBA in 15 pages, and it's just brilliant. And they talk about apostles. When you've got somebody who loves you and can't wait to tell the world about you, then the acquisition cost for that apostle actually goes down the more people they refer to your business, because then they're your free sales force. When they refer somebody to come to you to buy from you as well, you didn't have to go out and find them. Your existing customers are talking about you, and that's why virality online is so valuable, because basically you don't have to pay these people. They're just thrilled. And all of us have done this when we have seen somebody that we really believe in, when we've worked with a resource that we really believe in. We're happy to talk about that. Right? So whether I was on this call or not, I'm going to talk about the SCORE organization because I think they do phenomenal work. I'm going to talk about Federal Express because I know they're an insurance policy, and every time I've had a business, I have used them and they've been solid as a rock. So I am happy to talk about this stuff, and nobody has to pay me to do that. Does that make sense?
Okay, and Dawn, we have time for just about 2 more questions. So our next question, it comes to us from Joan, and she would like to know if you can explain the point about the 15% net after tax.
Okay. So Joan, is that right? That comes from Joan? All right, Joni, I have a question for you. All of us have gone to grocery stores, most of us anyway, at one point in our lives. For every dollar that we spend at a grocery store, does anybody that's listening have any idea how much of that dollar drops to the bottom line of an average grocery store? I'm not talking about specialty grocery stores. The short answer is $0.015. $0.015, which is insane. I am so tempted to go into a grocery store and kiss the ground that there is somebody on planet Earth that is willing to take on all that fixed expense and all that spoilage and all that shortage and all that management so that you and I could put dinner on the table for, in 20 minutes for $0.015 bottom line. Greg Crabtree, who is a CPA, who has a great website and it's called simplenumbers.me, like Mary Eddy, right? Simplenumbers.me, is on a tear, and he says for every dollar of revenues that a small business owner brings in, if you want to have a viable business, then 15 cents of that has to be left over after you have paid all of your expenses. So if you go down a profit and loss statement from the very bottom to the very end, I've shown you the top half in this presentation, right? So we start with revenues, but we don't get to keep all those revenues because we got to pay our direct expenses. After we pay our direct expenses, we have gross profit. It's gross because it's not a net number, it's a gross number because we still have operating expenses. So now we pay our rent and we pay our insurance and we pay our lawyer and our accountant and our web designer and all that stuff. And we end up with something called earnings before taxes. So again, we're not quite out of the woods yet because we have to pay our taxes. So we got one more expense category and we pay our taxes. After that, after we pay our taxes, we end up with, drum roll please, bottom line. You've heard that expression. Bottom line, net income, and net profit are all the same thing. That's that 15 cents out of that revenue line that we were talking about earlier. So for every dollar you bring in, Joan, you got to show 15 cents on the bottom line. And it's very hard to get to that, by the way. Most small business owners are not there. But what Greg Crabtree says of simplenumbers.me, he said, if you only are showing a 5% after-tax bottom line, right, that means for every dollar you bring in, only a nickel drops to the bottom line, you probably don't have a viable business. If you've got 10 cents on the bottom line, you're doing better than most, but it's not enough of a buffer if you have a slow period or if you have competition coming into your market. You have to have 15 cents on that bottom line. And everybody, if you don't know what you have on that bottom line, ask your accountant to print out a profit and loss statement for you and look at your revenue line, which is your top line, and look at your bottom line, which is at the end of all your expenses, what's left over, and see what percentage of that is there. If you're at 15%, you're doing great, but if you're not, then you have to improve your gross margin. And the first thing I recommend you do is to do some testing on your pricing, because nothing's going to help your bottom line more than if you can premium price what you're doing, and we gave you a little glimpse on how to do that.
Okay, Dawn, those are all the questions that we have time for today. If we did not have a chance to address your question during this segment, again, we encourage you to connect with a SCORE mentor today. And if you are interested in becoming a SCORE mentor, you can get information and apply online. And I'm posting a couple links here for you in the chat window. And as a reminder, a link to the recording of the session and the presentation slide deck will be sent and a post-event email that's going to go out later today, so be on the lookout for that. On behalf of SCORE and FedEx, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time out of your day today to attend this session, and I'd like to give a very big thank you to Dawn Fotopulos for presenting with us today. Dawn, thank you so much.
Oh, it was my pleasure, Alexa. And everybody, there's going to be a survey that gets sent around. Please fill that in. That gives us great feedback. We want FedEx to know they made a good investment. We see some really wonderful feedback in the chat box, but it's important that that gets captured also in the survey. It helps make us better. So thank you in advance for doing that.
Okay, and we hope that you can join us tomorrow for the Fix Your Business webinar being presented by Melinda Emerson. So thanks again, everyone, and take care.